Police work, police procedurals, cop shows. Most production companies, most novelists don't get it right. They miss a lot of stuff. They make some bad mistakes that cause cops like me to close the book or turn off the TV. But some people do get it right, and I think it would be cool to talk about the first author that really got me interested in reading police procedurals. Coming right up. My name is Ramesh Nyberg, and this is the Ram Writes Podcast. This is all about writing. It's all about homicide, murder mysteries, true crime, books, everything involved in all those discussions wrapped up into one. I'm a retired homicide investigator, and I have lots of stories to tell and lots of stories to write about, and I want to share them with you. Let's go. How many of you out there might be in law enforcement, or you're a lawyer, you're a doctor, you pick up a book, and it's starting off great. Great plot, interesting characters, and you're digging it. You know, that's an old term, kind of a throwback to my days, my generation. But you're enjoying this book, and you're wondering where it's going to go, and suddenly the author just completely lays an egg. I mean, they throw in something there. They try and describe something, and it just falls flat because they got it wrong. They got the surgical procedure wrong, or they got the legal aspect of it wrong. They talk about a trial procedure that just simply does not happen in real life. And in police work, guys, those of you out there who are in law enforcement or been in law enforcement, you've seen this dozens of times. You watch a TV show, you watch a movie, and you're sitting there going, oh, shit, man, they got this thing so turned around and so wrong. It just ruins the enjoyment, and you stop watching or you close the novel. My wife and I have sat on the couch many times, and I've started grumbling and complaining about, that's impossible. That it's not done that way. And she nudges me and says, we just calm down and just enjoy the show, so we don't have to change the channel again. This has happened many times. So I've learned to get a little bit better at it. But I'm still very discriminating as to what I would say is, good or bad or enjoyable or even tolerable. And you can't help that when you've done something for 27 years and these things jump out at you. So I've taken great pains to make sure my writing is accurate, to make sure it reflects what we actually did and the way we did it. And so I know this is frustrating for a lot of you. But I'd like to tell you a quick story about an author that really got me started with police procedurals way back in the 80s. Actually, I started in police work in 1979, and so I started reading books about police, and there's a great author named Joseph Wambaugh. And if you've never heard of him, and if you like to read police procedurals, I'm telling you, you need to read Joseph Wambaugh. His flagship novel, if you want to call it that, was The Choir Boys. And all of his novels are set in Los Angeles. The term The Choir Boys came from the uniform squad that he was writing about, and they're a crazy bunch. Each one of them, the characters really come to life, and that's what makes Wambaugh's writing so superb, is his ability to paint these characters to where you can really picture them, and you can really predict what they're going to do and how they're going to react. That's one of the hallmarks of Wambaugh's work. But the Choir Boys term came from their late night escapades after work, when they would get together as a squad and start drinking beer and kind of diffusing from the day, from their shift, talking about calls they were on and drinking and, cussing and just kind of pretty much venting about the work that they had to do. And by the way, this is a real thing. This is something that police officers have been doing for a very long time. And I remember we did it on our squad when I worked down in South District in uniform. We would go behind the library at 11 o'clock at night, midnight. Somebody would bring some beer, and we would all take turns bringing the beer and whatever, and sit back there and just unwind. And Wambaugh's characters, these uniform patrol officers, they had a nickname or a code name, you could say, for that late night gathering. They called it choir practice. And, this is one of the few times that life really imitates art, because that book was so popular and that term really caught on with a lot of cops, and we ended up calling our gatherings choir practices. And so that was one of the things that Wambaugh sort of established in real life, was this idea that, we're going to call this thing choir practice. And that obviously was the name for the book, The Choir Boys. He also wrote one called The New Centurions, and I can't for the life of me remember whether that came before The Choir Boys or not. I just believe that Choir Boys kind of put him on the map. However, New Centurions became the basis for a TV show much later that was, I believe, called Police Stories or Police Story, and Wambaugh was the chief consultant, if not the writer, of those episodes. Very popular series that O.J. Simpson actually acted in one or two of those episodes, if I recall correctly. Wambaugh's other books are definitely worth mentioning. In fact, I think there's a couple of them that are better than The Choir Boys that I enjoyed more. One is The Black Marble. I think that might be my favorite of his, probably because it focused on a homicide detective. And you really get into the mind and emotions of this detective as he's going through his work and the things that have affected him in life. And I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but I highly suggest The Black Marble really stands out in my mind as one of the greatest police procedurals ever written. Wambaugh also wrote The Onion Field, which was a fictionalized version of a real event in which a Los Angeles police officer and his partner were kidnapped at gunpoint, and one of them was killed. Tragic story, and the book follows the story itself in detail, and also the ensuing trial, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a long time since I read The Onion Field. Another one of his great works was The Blooding. Now, The Blooding kind of veers away from his fiction track. It's nonfiction, and it's a historical account of the birth of DNA and how DNA was first discovered by a scientist in England and how it was first used in civil cases involving immigration and paternity issues in court and so on. The book goes into the first time it was used in criminal cases in England, 2 murders of young teenage girls in a small village in England, and how the police decided to try and use DNA to determine who the killer was. And another fascinating read, and if you like to read about historical things and how things came to be, The Blooding is an outstanding book by Wambaugh. There have been so many other novels I've picked up and put down. It's sad to say. There was a very fine, a well-celebrated author named William Conitz. Conitz was a New York police chief or commissioner, I think, at one point, and his books did very well. I didn't care for the writing. I mean, yes, the realism was true and accurate, of course, but I wasn't a big fan of his writing style. But that's just me. Other non-police persons, and by the way, Joseph Wambaugh was a police officer for the city of Los Angeles, and I'm not sure in exactly what capacity, whether he worked in patrol or not. I'm pretty sure he did work in patrol at some point. There are other authors who were never in the police profession, but who've done a masterful job of getting it right and writing from a police officer's perspective. The first one that comes to mind for me is Nelson DeMille, a very famous author who's written some tremendous books. He's got a very kind of a dry sense of humor that I really like. The first book of his that I read was called The Gold Coast, but that had nothing to do really with law enforcement, although there was a criminal aspect to it. And the second one I read was The Lion's Game, in which the main character is a New York City police detective. And I'm telling you, he really hits it on the head when it comes to the overall viewpoint, the overall mindset of a police detective, and how he's trying to handle these cases, how he ends up working with the FBI and his frustrations with working with the federal agency, which is really just spot on. I mean, any county or municipal police officer that's ever worked on a task force, for example, and had to work side by side with the federal agencies, there's always a kind of a culture clash. It's not really a competitive thing like TV would like you to believe. It's more like a completely different language that the two different aspects of law enforcement will speak. And it's hard to describe unless you've actually been there, but I do describe it in my book whenever that is going to be published. And of course, I'll keep you posted on that. We haven't got a contract yet. And believe me, as I said in my previous episode, I'll shout it from the rooftops once we have a publication date. Carl Hiaasen is one of my favorite authors, another guy that writes with a fantastic sense of humor. His stories are near and dear to me because they originate in Florida. And if you're a Floridian and you haven't read Carl Hiaasen, put it on your to-do list because you will get a big kick out of his writing. And some of his stories also have a police officer or detective as a protagonist, and Carl does a terrific job with that. I met Carl at a writers' conference down in Key West many years ago, and he gave me some very simple advice that I've kept close to the vest and close to my heart for a long time. He signed one of his books for me, and he wrote, "Keep writing, good things will happen. I am living proof." And whenever I get frustrated or whenever I feel like I've got a kind of a roadblock with my writing, whether that's writer's block, which I don't ever really have, but when I feel tired and not sure if I want to write or read, I remember what Carl said, and it's been a tremendous source of encouragement for me. There's an author I started reading about a month ago, and this person was recommended to me by an avid reader of police procedurals. And I'm not going to name the author for several reasons. He's a very well-known author. In fact, his books ultimately were produced into a popular TV series. And I'm not going to say any more. I've said too much already. But I was reading one of his books, early books, and everything was going just fine, right? The detective was operating and acting like a detective should. The descriptions of the crime scene and the way the crime and the way the evidence was recovered and packaged and sent to the lab all rang true. And I'm thinking, yay, I'm cheerleading for this guy at this point and enjoying the story. The main character, was a little bit too hard-bitten for me. And I get it. People like to see this gritty, down-on-life, bitter, tough guy detectives, right? That, grumble at everybody and cuss at everybody. And, they've been involved in a bunch of shootings and they've been involved in a bunch of administrative stuff that's gumming up their career. But there was a lot of hostility between this main character and other detectives, which is not really common. There are some isolated situations where relationships like that happen. But as a matter of routine, detectives, police officers in general, try to put aside their differences and usually do their best to work together. So this guy has this kind of mean reputation and is not well liked by most of his colleagues and his superiors. And it just kind of soured the story for me. It just was not that realistic. But the part that really got me, the part that really made me realize that this author was never in an autopsy room, had never witnessed an autopsy, and really was kind of grasping at straws and hoping that he was getting it right, was the scene where a medical examiner in LA County, now this is not a small little podunk place somewhere in Iowa, no offense to Iowans out there, But this is not a coroner in some tiny little village somewhere. This is LA County, where they get dozens of homicides a day. And the medical examiner finishes the autopsy and then takes his fingers and closes the deceased person's eyelids. Now, we've seen this on TV. We've seen this dozens of times where, as a show of respect, the staring, lifeless eyes are closed by someone. My friends, medical examiners do not do this. This doesn't happen. I have witnessed hundreds of autopsies because it was part of our job as lead investigators in cases to go and witness the autopsy, actually sit there and discuss the case with the doctor while he's cutting the body open. I have never seen a doctor do that. That is just not the mindset of a medical examiner, especially one in LA County. Now, little 500-person town in Alabama or, Arkansas, again, no disrespect to people from that state. I've been to both states. They're nice. But a coroner that maybe doesn't have that much experience or is dealing with someone they might know and doing an autopsy on a deceased person that, they may know the family. Okay, I get it. Maybe they're going to close the decedent's eyes, but that's not happening in the LA County morgue, friends. It's not happening. And I kind of lost my stamina for reading that book, I'm sad to say, because it really started off well. Well, we'll continue talking about writing, reading, and I'd love to hear what you like. I'd like to hear what kind of books or writing you like or don't like and why. And if you're writing something, I'd love to hear from you because I'm writing something too. As I explained in my last episode, I'm working on a novel called The Flyboys. I think I'm about halfway through with the first draft. I don't know. We'll see. There's things that keep cropping up that my characters keep doing that I didn't really expect. But happily, these things are working out and they're enhancing the plot and kind of making things more interesting. That's all I've got today, guys. And I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, please click on the like button if you're watching this on YouTube or any of those podcast outlets that allow you to do so. And I hope you're going to tune in next time as we continue these discussions. And I'd love to hear from you, as I said before. If you're a young investigator and you want some tips on how to investigate, hey, look up my book called The 10 Must-Haves to Be a Great Detective. You'll find it on Amazon as a paperback or a Kindle ebook. Last but not least, if you're interested in doing your own podcast, I highly suggest you check out Buzzsprout, BUZZSPROUT.com, buzzsprout.com. It is the easiest. I mean, I haven't tried them all, but it's pretty damn easy. Just, click and go. And I love the simplicity of it, and they're really great professionals. So buzzsprout.com. If you look in the notes for this show, you'll see a link that'll take you right to their page, and you can get started. So check that out. So until next time, my friends, please be well, and I wish you fair winds and following seas.